Hi there, I'm Tim Irvine.
And I'm Stacy Irvine. Welcome to the Totum Wellness Podcast.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Totum Wellness Podcast. This is our first episode in Season 2. If you can believe that, Stace, right?
It is very exciting.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. It was a late night last night.
I don't often hear you say, I'm just all right. It's usually pretty damn good. What's up?
As you know, we were out later than usual.
Yes, that's true.
At the Vampire Weekend concert, celebrating our 29th wedding anniversary.
I know, crazy.
It was very exciting. Time goes really fast. It's a busy time of year, and I woke up this morning with very good intentions of doing my walk. I felt a little more tired than normal, and then Denver, one of our German shepherds, somehow killed a squirrel.
Somehow? She chases squirrel and kills it.
She killed it. She got one. She doesn't usually get them. She got one, and then she was head to toe covered in burrs. And it really took a lot of extra time out of my walk, a little bit of frustration. I didn't get my weightlifting session.
Did you have any
that
particularly words for the dog in that
Yeah,
scenario?
it was a bit of a scene. Anyhow, it's behind me. I'm here. I'm happy to be here.
So it derailed what you were going to be doing this morning, and that happens to everybody.
It does. I got the walk in, a little bit of cardio, but I didn't get the weights in that I wanted to do because it took too much time with the dogs.
Well, I think it's very typical of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And, we have our best intentions and we have our routines and our habits and those sorts of things. And life gets in the way and that's okay. And
that's normal.
Absolutely.
I think that's something too with this podcast and with Season 2. I think it's great for our listeners to know that you and I lead relatively normal lives. We like to go out. We like to eat all kinds of food. We like to drink alcohol. We like to have fun. We're not super strict about a lot of things, but we also experience maybe the negative side effects of the other things. And had I not been out last night drinking, having a good time, this morning probably would have gone a little better. I might have made better choices. Who knows? But it's
less
normal.
Frustration.
It's normal.
I think that even in those situations, if I compare it to 20 years ago when we were going out and doing things, like moderation is definitely something that we've adopted in our lives.
Yes.
And a more healthful approach to things. And it's kind of weird. Like this time of year is really busy. It's a bit of a start of the year,
Definitely.
Similar to January, but
yes.
Summer's over because summer routines are much different than fall routines. So September starts and you kind of got to get used to the new schedule and whatever else. And I really find, and this is something obviously we're going to talk about this today, is like, what are those habits that you and I have sort of learned about over the last 6-ish months that we've now adopted into our lives. And when you're starting in September and using that as a bit of a new year to begin, it's a really interesting way to look back and say, okay, what am I doing differently now than I was doing 6 or 12 months ago? And how has that benefited me? And we'll share that with everybody.
Yeah, this time of year for us is definitely our busiest time of year by far. Lots of people think in the fitness industry it's January, but for you and me, it is definitely fall for our family. You coach football. I coach track and field. Our kids all play in sports that are really in full gear in the fall with football, hockey, soccer. So we need extra energy to do a good job of all of those things. And I think that is why we have to prioritize our sleep and our workouts and, not always going out to concerts and that type of thing during the week, which, weekends, I think it's a lot easier to do those things during the week. On a Tuesday, it's kind of a killer, but it's fun. And so I guess we'll talk about how we navigate it.
We talked a little bit about this last night when we were at dinner, that we both feel a little more energy overall.
Mm-hmm.
And, coming out of COVID, like we struggled, as I'm sure a lot of people did, is like, hey, do you want to go do this fun thing? And it's like, oh, not really. Like, I
The
just want to
social
stay
part was
inside or
hard.
whatever else. Like,
Hard
and
to get back
now
into that
we
energy.
both feel more re-energized to be able to go do these. Last night was a concert and we were celebrating our anniversary, but it was like we wanted to do it. We were excited about going to do it. And that's a really fun place to get back to.
It's new. I'm feeling more energy around, and especially this fall. Well, and we were very busy with Film Festival this year because we were a hospitality sponsor. And this year was the first year for TIFF that I did feel that really good, fun energy. And it was fun to be out, and all the stars were back because the strike was over. And I think that was a really exciting way to launch into fall, as it often is in the city. And I think the projects that we're working on are super exciting. So it's good. We're both feeling energized.
The 15 or 20 new projects that we have along with everything else?
Don't tell me the number. I don't want to know that. But yes.
I'm exaggerating.
It's exciting.
It is. Okay, so let's crack into this. You go first, and we're going to be talking about these habits that we've put into our lives or are trying to make part of our lives. So what's number one for you?
Number one for me is realizing that I do need to really add some heavy lifting regularly to my routine. I listened to the podcast over the summer. We both listened to it. I listened to it more than once, I think almost probably 2.5 times. So Dr. Stacy Sims on the Huberman podcast, a fantastic podcast about women, hormones, nutrition, exercise, and what some of those impacts are. So based on that, these are things that I knew and that I practiced, but I probably didn't focus on the heavy lifting enough. So what I would do is, just like today, be out with the dogs, walk the dogs, come back, do a weight workout at home, and definitely lift heavy. But because I'm doing it after I walk the dogs, there's phone calls that happen. I run out of time, exactly like today, and I don't prioritize it as much as I should. And I don't get as much heavy lifting in as I should. We don't have a squat rack. Our bench press was made out of pieces of wood by our teenage son. I'm not that comfortable using it. I need to have a different plan. I either need to come and jump into a class here that is heavy weightlifting, or you and I need to figure out something where we dedicate like a night or an early morning a week where it's heavy lifting, because if we don't actually schedule it, it's not going to happen. And I'm really this year focused on building lean body mass. So that is something that I'm working hard on.
And are there any specific health reasons for lifting heavier than you have been?
Well, for me, it's an issue being postmenopausal and thinking about my bone density and knowing that my whole life it's been a little bit low. And then I really want to work on gaining those benefits of having more lean body mass. Now that we have our 2 older kids are out of the house, we only have one. The schedule is better with just the one at home, and I have a little bit more freedom of time. And I know that during all those years of pregnancy and raising kids, I lost some level of fitness and I lost some muscle mass, and I'm really determined to try to gain that back over this year.
Awesome. Now, should I go with mine?
Yeah.
And this is my first one. It's not necessarily number one priority, but things that sort of stuck out to me, and is this supplementing with creatine.
Mm-hmm.
So the evidence is very compelling and solid that using creatine is going to help you get stronger. It's going to, if you're training to an intense level, even if it's short intervals like sprint training, that sort of thing, it has a big impact and benefit to improving your strength and improving your capabilities in that area. And the other thing that is great about it, it now has it is shown to have a really positive impact on your brain. So that body of evidence is starting to grow more and more, but memory, cognition, these sorts of things. And if you think about our bodies without creatine supplementation, it's kind of like having your gas tank, over the gasoline and creatine, the same thing in this analogy. Your gas tank's 80% full. And the only way you can get the gas tank full is to put a different kind of gas in. So creatine supplementation tops up our levels of creatine, and it's directly related to in-muscle energy production. So if you think about, if I don't use creatine and I go for my workouts, I'm at sort of 80% capacity for producing energy or using my muscles or getting recovery from a short intensity exercise. So if I top up, which there's a period of top up that you need to go through to get to 100%, now I'm like, I've got these more energy sources to be able to do the same type of activity, which means that I'm actually going to be able to work harder than I was. So my maximal effort will be a better maximal effort, which means my returns are
You'll get
better
better results.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's break down. I do it too. Obviously, everyone in our family is doing creatine. It's fine for teenagers, young athletes. We've done the research on that, but let's be very specific. What exactly do you do? How much a day?
So 3 to 5 grams per day is the general recommendation. You don't need to do more loading, like a 10 or 20 or 30 grams, because that might get call it that 20% top up faster, but most people don't need that.
Yeah.
And it does come with some potential gut irritation when you do higher loads. So that 3 to 5 grams, which if you buy creatine monohydrate, good quality, it's fairly inexpensive, it's easily accessible. It will come with a scoop. Those are typically 3 to 5 gram scoops.
So you just do one scoop.
One scoop. I put it in my morning. It's not really a smoothie. It's kind of a smoothie that I do.
Right.
So I include that in there. Anything that I'm having that's in powdered form or liquid form, I put in my drink. And it really doesn't change the taste of it.
You just shake it up.
Shake it up.
And you drink that every day. And I think that creatine, in some people's minds, especially women, got a bit of a bad rap because teenagers, guys who are weightlifting were taking quite a bit more than the 3 to 5 grams. And then there's also the potential of, you're bringing in water to your muscles, and they like that. But sometimes women aren't really excited about that. But when you're in those lower dosages, I've been doing it now, I think, for 2 to 3 years. And I notice a little bit more energy with lifting, but I don't notice any of that water kind of weight gain or anything like that, which I think is good because I do think some people are worried about that. Okay, powders. That's my next one. Okay. Everybody makes fun of me at our house about our powders. I have a whole series that I go through that includes the creatine, and it's a good system for me because it works efficiently with my day and I don't have to really add a lot of extra effort. So what I have been adding to make sure I've covered all my bases as far as nutrition goes is that I do 1 scoop of bulletproof collagen in my first cup of coffee. I do a scoop of protein powder in my second cup of coffee in the morning.
I didn't even know this.
See, it's not a big deal at all.
I got to start drinking coffee in the morning.
There you go. And then at lunch, I mix a bunch of these other powders that I feel that I need. So one of them is creatine. I mix it with my magnesium, which is, I do the 365 mag by
ITL.
ITL, that company. And so I add that together. It has to be added to water ahead of time. So I add that to my drink. Then I do greens powder, which is sea vegetables by Skinusa. And then I add a bit of an electrolyte just like a powder by BioSteel, because that other stuff doesn't taste very good. So I mix all those together. That's one drink that I have while I'm eating my lunch. And I feel like I'm covering all my bases. Protein is something that, because I'm focused on lean body mass and increasing that, I've realized that is another change I've made in a healthy habit is I've got to increase my protein at every chance I get. 1 gram per pound of body weight. That's not easy to get in a day.
Right. If nutritionally speaking,
Yes.
and without supplementation.
Yes, without supplementation.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of protein consumption. For
Exactly.
Sure.
So that's my number 2 is all my powders.
Those are good ones. So basically, what you're doing is you're taking these nutritional supplements, making it easy for yourself to consume them by. It's not pill form. It just goes in a drink. You make the drink taste good. And that's the same thing with when I do the creatine in the mornings. That drink that I have, it's a United Greens drink with protein. So it's awesome. It's got all these nutrients. I had that one
today. It was good.
Oh, you did? Okay, good.
Well, because we usually have the Skanusa protein powder, which we all love. We ran out of that. So I did the United, it's protein plus super greens.
Yes,
correct?
Exactly.
Yeah. And it was great. So I put that in my coffee. My coffee turned green, which was a little weird, but it was good.
Yeah, as long as you're okay with that, it tastes fine. So that's an awesome really little. Are there any quantities that you think people should be cautious with if they hear what you do and they're like, I want to start doing that too?
So I usually go by the recommended on all of the packages. Magnesium is one. So I've got the bone building formula. Magnesium is one where you'll know if you're taking too much. You have loose stool. So it's not fun, but then you need to take it back. Sometimes magnesium's hard to get in our diet, depending on how you eat, but it's pumpkin seeds and some of the other nuts. And so it's not that easy. And oftentimes people are low in magnesium. I love that formula that I have because it also is good for my bones, which is something that I'm thinking about at my age. And I would say creatine, we covered the protein. Most people are a little bit lower. Like if you're lifting weights and trying to put on lean body mass, the protein, I think, again, you just go with the recommended.
Yeah. And if anyone has any questions about that, they should talk to a healthcare provider that is 100%. Knowledgeable in that area.
100%. Or if you're taking other medications and you want to see if any of these interact with your medications, I think you definitely need to speak with a nutritionist, maybe your pharmacist and your healthcare provider just to make sure you're on the right track. That is part of the reason though I like the powders is that it is really more like food. It's more like you're actually just eating food and adding food, which we know is the best way to absorb these things that we need.
Especially if it's fiber-rich food, it slows the digestion of everything, which is also helpful.
Yes.
Okay, my second one is, it's really just a concept. So we've been at this for a long time. So we've had clients, both you and I, our first clients are still our clients. So we're now talking 25, 26 years.
Yeah.
And those people really haven't aged a ton. Obviously, they have chronologically, but physically, they're still doing so much of their same thing. They're totally crushing it. So this concept of being strong, having muscle mass, being strong. So strength training and having cardiovascular fitness.
Yes.
Those two things, that combination of, if you're doing those two things well and consistently, everything else kind of takes care of itself. So that all-cause mortality metric is one that gets improved hugely. And as you can imagine, if you're lifting weights a couple times a week or moving heavy stuff, right? Because that's really like if you work on a farm and you're moving heavy shit around all the time, then you are getting some of that strength training.
Shit sometimes.
Sometimes you're on a farm. That's right. If you're doing heavy loading stuff, and you're getting, you're really puffing, multiple times a week from either a workout or something else that you're doing, those are super important for long-term health. And then, of course, if you're more healthy, if you feel better, you generally eat better. Your sleep is better.
Active, your sleep is better.
So there's all these benefits that go with it that help your overall health and wellness profile.
And quality of life. And I think it's important to clarify, lots of these clients are in their 80s and some in their late 80s. My mom just left for a trip. She's in her 80s and yes. And she just let me know, she said so she's with a group and there's some mobility issues in the group. And that's making the airport really difficult to manage because they're having to get, the carts that drive people and all that. Because if you're not able to mobilize yourself from point A to point B and you're traveling, it's a real challenge. So I think that most of us would look at these kind of super fit 80-year-olds and say, yeah, that when I have time to travel and I'm in my 80s, that's why I want to travel, is to be able to go on a hike and to be able to maybe do a bike tour and do all these fabulous things, but still have the capacity to go walk and carry my suitcase and be able to do all these things. It's a kind of a game changer.
It's so important. And we've seen it for years. Like it's just in front of us all the time.
We kind of took it for granted, I think.
We did. And now with the whole longevity conversation and health span, which is like being healthy
it's a
for
good
as long
term.
as
Health
possible.
span is a really good term because, you could say, I want to live to be 100, but you should really be thinking about what's the quality of the years. In order to live to be 100, I'd say most of us would want to be mobile and enjoying life.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I really like about this combination, be strong, have good cardio fitness, is it's really simple. Those are two things that, I just got to move heavy stuff every week sometimes. And I need to make sure that I'm puffing fairly hard multiple times a week. Those are pretty easy things to do. And I've told you this at home. A really simple way of doing both at the same time is I climb stairs carrying heavy dumbbells. Mm-hmm. So I'm working on my grip strength, my overall loading, my whole system. And by the time I'm done a set of 6-7 flights of stairs,
it's a good exercise.
I am like my heart rate's at like 160.
Right.
Which,
and how long would that take you?
Minute and a half. So I'm holding. So I'm grip strength training at the same time. Yeah. And it doesn't seem that heavy to start with.
Yeah.
And I'm loading my skeleton.
Yeah.
But by the time I'm done everything, it's a minute and a half in. I've been it's not just holding, like it's the whole
kind of anaerobic, which is great. And so I think that that's an important piece is for your MVO2 to improve that, which is your oxygen capacity. Going for a long run is not your best strategy to improve your MVO2. You need to do bursts of demanding activity to get your heart rate up to as close to max as you can handle. And then try to sustain that for at least 30 seconds. And that's what's going to have the biggest impact on your MVO2. Yeah.
The upside with that, it's hard, but it's short. Yeah. Which is really nice. Like you don't have to go for a 45-minute, 50-minute run. If you want to and you enjoy that kind of stuff, great, but don't ignore the short,
other
intense
side of
stuff
it.
either.
Yeah. And to me, the runs outside nature, that's more stress relief. And that's more about doing things that you enjoy or,
absolutely.
Playing pickleball, things like that with your friends. That it's cardio for sure. You're moving, but don't think that that's going to have an impact on your actual MVO2, which is a really important measure of longevity.
Yes.
So that's one of your goals for this year. Did you notice, the thing that I like about intervals is it gets easier fast and you realize, okay, I am actually getting in better shape. Yeah. I think that that's a really good thing. The first ones feel awful. There's no question about it. If you haven't done this before, just know it's going to feel awful, but it does change quickly. Yeah. And that's your body really adapting to it, which is exciting.
Agreed.
My third one is a bit of a journey that we talked about on this podcast last year, which is my MHT, which stands for menopause hormone therapy. I went through menopause probably 2 years ago and I thought everything was good until all of a sudden, for no particular reason, I had joint pain in both my feet, my ankles, and my knees that would not go away no matter what I did for therapy. And after doing a bit more research,
there was a lot of complaining in our house.
Sure, just to you. After doing a bit of research, I realized estrogen, one of the very important factors of estrogen is that it's anti-inflammatory for our tissues. And it made a lot of sense, the fact that I'd gone through menopause a long time ago, but your estrogen doesn't just stop immediately. It kind of lowers down, and everyone's different, and how it works for everyone is different. My message would be that since I went on the hormone therapy, I've noticed a huge difference. The joint pain went away within about 3 weeks, and I did start on a slightly higher dose. Now I'm down to a much lower dose that I control myself. I kind of dose it based on how I'm feeling, how my joints are feeling. And I think that it's something that women really want to be talking about. There's many different symptoms of menopause, and some of them are very debilitating. And the important piece here is that you have options. There's all kinds of new drugs. We're learning new things all the time. And the other piece of it is, like, you can try something and stop it if it doesn't work. I think sometimes people view this, that I made the decision to take hormones. Now there's no looking back. This is what I have to do for the rest of my life. That's not true. You could try it and you could say, this doesn't work for me, I don't want to do it anymore. Or you could try it and say, this particular combination works okay. Is there something better? And that's where you need to be able to talk to a qualified healthcare provider about my next investigation, because I want to build lean body mass, is into testosterone. And you and I have had this conversation where we're going to go get our blood work done and see what our levels are like for that. And if we also should be supplementing or, using the medication to add a bit to that as we're trying to put on muscle mass, because I suspect that I'm a little bit too low in that. So that is my third change and kind of third insight for my health for this new year moving forward.
I think it's a really important one, because for the most part, since we've been involved in this, the focus on females, and especially 40 up, and the nuances that are maybe they're a little bit greater than nuances, really important health related things that are different than men, that in the last few years are really starting to be publicized. There's way more research on it. I think it's pretty awesome, and it's going to show us, well, it'll go right down into teenage female male athletes.
Agreed.
There are going to be differences that we should all pay attention to, and not just lump everybody into the same bucket of, well, train this way. This is the best way to train. It may or may not be.
I think this is a huge testament to, you will rarely hear me say this, social media and podcasts, that you can find some good information out there. You need trusted sources. You can find lots of bad information, and, please always check your sources and have a health professional that you can get advice from. But there's no question that starting these conversations happens because people see it come across their feed, or, they're listening to a podcast and they talk to a friend about a podcast, which is so fantastic.
Okay, my last one is, it's really kind of a conceptual one. It's one, I'm going to relate it back to the strength and cardiovascular fitness. So Dr. Ellen Langer is a psychology prof at Harvard. She has been, for the last 3 or 4 decades, researching the impact of psychology on physical health. So a couple of big takeaways that I've had, because we both read her book, Counterclockwise, which is fantastic. Book. I reread it in the past few months because she came out with The Mindful Body, which is her latest book. Some similar themes through it, but a little bit different for sure. Definitely worth a read. The takeaways for me, I think more than anything else, is our brain has a huge impact on how our physical bodies manifest themselves. So I'll use her counterclockwise study as a quick example. They took 2 groups of men who were elderly, and they put them in at separate times in an environment. So basically a dorm. And for one group, for both groups, they made it all like it was 20 years earlier. But one group could not talk or think about things in the future. So let's say it was 1990 that the study happened. So it was 1970. The other group could talk about whether it was present day, 1970, 1960, it didn't matter. The magazines, the things that were on the newspaper, the TV, all of it was that point in time.
They took them back in time.
They took them back in time. That's a much shorter way of saying it. Thank you. I can be verbose on these things.
Yeah.
So anyway, they measured all these outcomes pre and post. And the group that had to stay in that time frame, we call it 1970, they all physically had improvements in all these measures. Their mobility, their cardiovascular health, brain, it was remarkable. And they didn't do any training or anything. It was just basically their brains are in a younger state of mind. And for doing that, they actually got healthier. So it showed the power of being able to just think your way to better health. And part of the things that she talks about is in our society, when you're 40, you should be this way. And when you're 50, you should be this way, and 60 and 70 and so forth. And there's no demarcations necessarily. It's just like, well, when you're older, you retire, you stop doing these things, you don't sprint anymore, you don't do this, you don't do that. And so it kind of falls away and we get older before we need to. So perfect example.
Like false limitations. And the healthcare system can be the worst for this, because you and I both dealt with elderly parents in the healthcare system where you'll often get a reply, well, they're 80, whatever. What do you expect?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's a good example. And if you hear that enough times, it totally impacts how you feel physically.
So I think the greatest example of this is what we're seeing now in professional or elite sports. Everyone's playing longer.
Yes.
They're, at ages that they've never played these sports before. Yes. Well, that's because now it's like there's people that are disproving what's supposed to happen, where 30 years ago you had, if you had a 10-year NHL career, you were way over the hill. And now people are playing 20 years.
What I loved this summer at the Olympics, because I coach sprints, so many of the female sprinters had babies and were back as moms competing. And that would have probably been unheard of even in the last Olympics. There would have been very few. And this Olympics, there were way more, which is so exciting, especially for women, to say that you could go and have a child and your career isn't over. I think it's wonderful. And I think we really do need to change our mindset, and that provides physical benefits, as she has proven.
Absolutely.
Her work is brilliant. I have so much respect for the work that she's done, and it's so needed in today's society.
Absolutely. And back to the clients that we have that are in their 70s or 80s and still I love being able to say this, they're doing everything that they've always done. They haven't had to give up anything. It might be slower, but what a gift that is, to be able to be doing all the things that you love to do and not to have a restriction, including living in your own home, not having anybody that you need to count on for help or those sorts of things. That independence is really, really powerful. So it's a big recommendation. I talk to people about it all the time, that this sort of concept is really important for our overall health.
So what would you say, based on the book? Like you said, your one takeaway is, that of course we know our brain affects it. What would be one practical thing that you could do every day, or someone could do, that you think would have a positive impact this way?
Oh boy, that's a really good question. I think, well, I hear this quite a bit. We're both over 50. We've got a bunch of friends that are over 50 or right around 50 or going to be 50. And every once in a while you hear somebody make a comment, well, at my age or something, even at 50, like saying, okay, so eliminate all of those, because what you're doing is you're reinforcing that whole idea of, well, I'm older now. I shouldn't be able to, or my eyesight's fading. That's why, because I'm older and so forth. So
we're going to take that out, like at my age.
Take that out and replace it with, I love like that whole 30-year-old mindset. So if you're around young, energetic people, guess what happens to you? you start to think more young and energetic. If you're around lethargic older people, you get lethargic and think older. So don't.
Avoid that. All right.
We don't have many
lethargic
older people that we're around. So we're lucky because we see it in action.
Yeah. That's good. I like it. Good advice.
Anything else that you'd like to share?
I think the main takeaway here is that so many times this information can be overwhelming. We did talk about the podcast and the social media. You could every day watch hours of advice on so many different things. And to me, the best thing to do is look at the really big pieces and what's most important. And I think, we've each said 3 things that we've done that have made a big difference. But know that if tomorrow, after listening to this, you pick one thing, that's a great step in a good direction. And I always say, as long as you're moving in the forward direction, that's positive. And, the odd night you're going to be out at a concert drinking late and you're going to feel crappy the next day, but that's okay too. It's all about a balance and not getting down on yourself when, things don't work out the way that you want them to.
Absolutely. And I think, as we've talked about, the whole purpose for us doing this podcast is to take that more complex information that is out there. You still have to cut through all the weeds, and there's a lot of misinformation. And so we try to make it practical and in a shorter time frame so that you can listen to the 2.5 hour podcast if you want to, but we're going to condense it for you with the messages that I think are really helpful for people. Thanks for listening to the Totum Wellness Podcast. Please follow us on Apple, Google, or Spotify and leave a 5-star review and comment. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, and please spread the word to family and friends.